We are probably, if not, at the bottom of the market. We are at a challenging time for debt, but I would say we're in a very positive time for equity raising because everyone will start to see that the opportunity is coming back, certainly in central London, and I won't talk about the rest of Europe, but in central London it's a real opportunity. My job, my future role, and it has been for a few years, is to find opportunities to help and support people and listen and give advice, be the sounding block. So that's my job going forward. There is very few projects being delivered in 2026, and we happen to be a very large proportion of that. Hardly anything in 27, hardly anything in 28, nothing in 29. So if there's one time to acquire, to redevelop, to move forward, it is now, because
welcome to the People Property Place podcast. Today we are joined by Alexander Morris, Development Director at BGO. BGO is a leading top 10 global real estate private equity investment management advisor and globally recognized provider of real estate services. Its specialist central London office fund, Welput, was formed in 2001 and is the largest unlisted specialist real estate fund to invest in and develop central London offices. The fund currently holds a portfolio of 9 assets comprising over 1 million square foot of accommodation spread across central London's core sub-markets. Alexander has previously worked at Tishman Spire, Minerva PLC, ALM Associates, as well as Gardiner and Theobald, and it gives me great pleasure that he joins me on the podcast today. Welcome.
thank you for inviting me.
Not at all. Well, look, you've had a fascinating career. You've managed to reinvent yourself time and time again. And I know Development Director as a title at BGO doesn't quite do justice in terms of the depth and breadth of the role you actually do. But a place that I always like to start these conversations is how and why did you get into real estate?
Back in 1990, when I finished school, I didn't want to go to university. I went to look at a job, and unfortunately we were in a tough time. We were in a recession, couldn't find a job. My father is a fellow of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, brought a white book home and said, "Son, have a look at this." So I went through this book and thought, I'm quite good at maths. I quite enjoy being part of a team. QSing is it. I then phoned up Bristol Polytechnic or UWE and asked for a place. And that's how I got onto a QS degree.
So you grew up, your dad was in property.
Yeah.
And which part of property?
So he was general practice.
So he's a general practice surveyor doing a bit of rating, valuation, property management,
Yeah.
leasing, investment type work.
Yeah.
You're never really drawn to that?
No, not really. If I'm honest, I wanted to make quick money, get out into the world, get away from school. And all I saw with university was more work. and that is the difference. Whereas my father said, time to go and find an alternative path. You tried that and it didn't work. So.
And what kind of kid were you at school growing up?
I enjoyed sport. I enjoyed my mates. I'd less enjoyed sitting in front of teachers. I had a lot of fun. I went to a great school. Still got some very good friends from that. And that was life. Life was sport, enjoying yourself, and less so about education.
And the thoughts of doing academics and essays just didn't exactly excite you.
No.
But having looked through that paper, you just thought, actually, real estate, the tangible aspect of it, QSing, that is a career that I could see myself in.
Yeah, but I think it partly was because of maths. I actually really enjoyed maths. So I wasn't lectured at maths. Maths was an enjoyable part of my day at school. And when I read you needed to be good at maths, that seemed like a good connection. I also didn't want to do the same as my father. It was the same with my brother. My brother was super gifted at sport. I didn't want to go to the same school as him because he was so good at something. So I wanted to do something different, like the idea of real estate. But I didn't really know what I was doing. So I went for 4 years of university to find an opportunity. And this is where I am after that.
So you did those 4 years, as it were.
Yep.
Did you do a sandwich year in between?
Yes.
And what did you do for that sandwich year?
I actually did 2 of the 6 months. I worked for a contractor in a prison, not literally in a prison, but doing work on a prison. And another 6 months with a project management firm doing a project out in Reading. So I did two sides, so client side and contracting side. And that's what actually made me make the decision I wanted to go client side.
Interesting. So having graduated, you went advisory side. Is that to kind of get your letters and get a grounding? And so you landed at G&T, Gardiner Theobald, in a QS team. Is that right?
That's right.
And so can you just talk to me about that period at G&T, some of the projects that you're working on and that kind of journey from kind of graduating?
So in the early days, as a graduate at Gardiner Theobald, we were working for the old partnership. And a graduate was someone that was there to learn and understand and be taught. So I worked in retail elements. I worked in offices. I did quite a varied scope. So if it was logistics, I would be in logistics. So I was spread across quite a few different partners. And then I focused on retail, amazingly. And I had the opportunity to work on a super scheme, which was the London Eye, or the Millennium Wheel as I knew it. And that happened to be the retail team. And then after retail, I then had this opportunity to changing into offices. And that's when I started at 30 Smeriax, which I'm sure you'll ask about later.
So you transitioned to offices. You got some experience in retail, transitioned to offices. Day to day, you said you were there to kind of help. What were the skills what were the projects, and what were the parts of the projects that you were involved with as a QS?
So varied again from the start, helping someone acquire land. I was there with the developer creating values. I would be doing valuations. I would go and do final accounts. I would then do the day-to-day estimating. So I did everything other than bills of quantities. I remember doing that at university and thinking, I do not want to do bills of quantities. So I didn't do any of those. But because I worked from various partners on various projects, I got the breadth from start to end, which again was a great education. And I thank Gardiner Theobald for that.
For someone listening to this, what does a quantity surveyor, why is a quantity surveyor so important on a project?
So I think it's probably different today than it was when I was doing it. So when I was doing it, it was about being the accountant, being the person that helped the client and the team protect the expenditure on the project. So whether or not it's setting the budgets, whether it's managing it during the process, looking at variations, looking at changes, and then agreeing a final account within the overall budget. Effectively, that's what I was doing.
And so you were doing that from a financial perspective, but also kind of learning how to deliver or see a project evolve as well. Talk to me about that transition to offices, and why did you want to move into offices at that stage?
So I was a very ambitious young person that wanted to be the senior partner of Gardiner Theobald as quickly as possible. There was an opportunity that came to Gardiner Theobald, which was to be a part of the first tower in the City of London since NatWest Tower, which was probably 30 years prior to that. I happened to be a young person that was available, and I went to that interview. I met an individual that I'm still friends with now, and I thought to myself, this is the moment. If I get this fully focused, this is going to give me that path to senior partner. This is that moment where I want to push forward. And that is the transition for me to offices. So I took a gamble because it was a tower, it didn't have planning permission. It was a Grade 2 star listed building. It had its challenges. Many partners in Gardiner Theobald didn't think it was something that would actually be achieved because its towers haven't been built. And I thought, this is the moment.
So you kind of became part of that project?
Yeah.
And that was a roaring success?
I believe so. I worked from October 1997 to the end of 2004. So that's quite a long period from the day it was acquired all the way through to the day it was leased and handed over. One project, Central London, and I think most people know what 30 Smeriax is.
And if they don't?
If they don't, you know it's the Gherkin.
The Gherkin is more, I guess, better known, right, rather than.
Yeah, it was a name brought out by, I think it was either the Evening Standard or it was a criticism of the work. And until Norman Foster actually said the word Gherkin, it was used as a negative. Now it's used as a positive. And you say Gherkin anywhere in the world, pretty much most people know what that Gherkin is.
And so why, having kind of done that project and spent the time and effort, and you touched on earlier having got your sandwich year, knowing that the client side was the kind of the route that you wanted to get to. Why did you spend 9 years on the advisory side before you looked at making the pivot or making a move away from G&T?
I think it's to start from the beginning and go to the end. I learned so much in that period of time, from acquiring to design development to budgeting to leasing to construction to selling, absolutely everything in that one moment. And it's also an incredibly iconic building that everybody knew about. So it meant that I was learning. I worked incredibly hard. I spent all my time at that project learning from people that were much more experienced than me. And as I say, the individual that I work with there, I'm still friends with today. And I am the mentee, he's the mentor, and I still ask him questions today.
And so it was the fact that you could stay on such an iconic project from start to finish and really gain experience across everything front to back to front. That's kind of what kept you there to kind of see that through. You left after 9 years or so, late 2003, and you moved to ALM Associates. Why did you move, and how did that come about?
Part of it was I wanted something different. I'd done quite a bit of project management in that scope with the 30 Summary Acts, and I wanted to move away from just being a QS. I wanted to expand. I also felt like I could do it on my own. I felt confident that I wasn't going to get to the path of being a senior partner. It changed. I didn't want to remain as a QS. I wanted to have more. This was my path. So I resigned actually the week before I went to the Rugby World Cup final. I went on holiday and I resigned saying I wanted to do something different. I set up ALM Associates and I worked for 2, maybe 3 years doing development management, project management, and supporting others in their aspirations going forward.
So you set up your own business at that stage? Just you?
Yeah, just me.
And was that a humbling experience, or was it an enjoyable thing that you relished, having kind of been released from a more of a partnership-led business to being a bit more entrepreneurial? And
I mean, it had different challenges. I was incredibly lucky. My wife and she was working, so therefore financially it was an easier decision for me to make than about money coming in the door. But it was about that, go and get that opportunity, go and find the idea. It wasn't that I disregarded being a partnership. I felt that I had more autonomy. It meant that I could go out and cycle and run and swim and do my work. I could go and work for people that I wanted to and express myself slightly differently, rather than being in a partnership where you were doing that single role. And if you see where my career has gone, I've definitely moved from that single source to that multifunctional. And that was probably, that decision has changed me into what I'm doing now.
You did that for just shy of 3 years before moving to Minerva PLC as a project director. Can you just talk to me about that transition, why you did that, how it came about?
I think it's quite an easy choice. I made it for a career. I moved from ALM Associates to Minerva. I actually did consultancy work for them for about a year or 18 months, looking at a scheme that was a tower in the city. And how do we get best value? Because raising money at that time was quite difficult. So I worked with them, got a new planning permission. And at that point, again, the new planning permission, they offered me a job. So I looked at this is 750,000 square feet in the heart of the city. I could call my own. I wanted to then, as my own, deliver and present it. So I made a career choice, not necessarily about anything other than I wanted to be a part of this project. And with that, it set my CV up as another strong city office to support my career going forward. So it was very much a career path for me as Alexander than really going to work for Minerva because of Minerva.
And was it a difficult choice to move away from running your own business at this stage? Or was it kind of a part of my ego, I can see the bigger opportunity, and actually, the career choice and the CV building, the project association, that is really what I want to be doing longer term?
That was the goal. I knew one of the individuals working there that invited me in for meeting. He worked with me at 30 St Mary Axe, so I knew him very well. He was suggesting this was a good project to work on. And once I looked under the hood, working with Grimshaw, previously I'd worked with Foster's, great architects to work with. Big scheme, powerful scheme, and it's still sitting there today as a very prominent project. So again, it wasn't because of Minerva. It was because I had this opportunity on this project, knowing that my goal is to be a central London office developer. And I have 2 on my bank that started in 1997, finished in 2011.
So when did that kind of come into your psyche that is what you wanted to do? Was that way back in the G&T days when you kind of put your hand up and said, I want to be on this 30 St Mary's project? Or was it kind of having delivered that, you go, actually, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to create?
So taking 30 St Mary on at Gardiner Theobald, I wanted to be the best QS to get to senior partner. I sort of changed my view, having met this individual that helped me and spent a lot of time with me, given me other opportunities. So I would say within 3 to 4 years, I knew that QSing wasn't for me. I knew that I wanted to have a more broader opportunity, as well as have the chance of helping others, which is the same as what this individual did. And to be able to do that, I needed to get higher up. Be more responsible
and specialize, or have a kind of a niche to.
Well, I think the thing is, I love London. I've lived all my life in London. Central London offices are the best in the world, and I will say that, irrespective of what other people say. It is a great opportunity, and I live here. My family are here, so why else would I work anywhere else?
You were with Minerva for 3.5 years or so, or just shy of 3.5 years. Can you just talk to me about delivering that scheme, or the scheme, and the kind of different parts of that development process as well that you were involved with?
So I sort of explained earlier about it was a tower originally, new planning permission. It's still 750,000 square feet, so still a big chunk. I got supported by the senior management, and it was about looking at a market, which, if you think about what happened, this is 2007, 2008. Minerva had 1.5 million square feet of offices in central London, plus a residential scheme. So my job in that time was to deliver the best product on time, on budget, so that we could lease it. And that was part of that key role that I had at Minerva. So I learned a lot about how to get the team to work together, how to not value engineer, but how to get the best out of a project financially, working with contractors, working with subcontractors, working out the best way to deliver that end goal, which had to be completed on time and to allow us to lease. And then the leasing started. And again, it's a new opportunity. I had done it at 30 Spire X, but leasing was great. Start about marketing suites, start to talk about how you sell buildings, how do you move forward. And we did a pre-lease, and that pre-lease was with an organisation called Lockton. I'm still friends with those individuals at Lockton, 15 years later, which is because we worked together to deliver that. Then there was another legal firm that are still there. So that I learnt a lot at Minerva, and I thank them for giving me that opportunity to continue the exposure into property development.
And at the end of one project, you were looking for the next project, and is that when Tishman came knocking, or how?
Well, interestingly enough, the individual I referred to at 30 St Mary Axe, he employed an individual called Tom Farrell, and Tom Farrell was the head of development for Tishman Spire out of New York. Happened to be having dinner with my ex-colleague and said they're looking for a new person because someone had resigned. I got a phone call, went to meet Tom, and the rest is history. But I think Tishman Spire is a no-name, a fantastic name in North America. And with the recommendation of my mentor, it seemed absolutely the right choice to go. And especially the link between his mentee and mentor as well, becoming my ultimate boss, felt like the right answer.
And so the mandate at that time was still Central London offices.
Yeah.
And so can you just talk to me about schemes that you were involved with and what you did during that tenure at Tishman?
So 2 larger schemes, very similar type roles. 30 St Mary Axe was an owner-occupier building. So in Tishman Spire, there was a relationship with Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs, Tishman Spire delivered their New York headquarters. They wanted a European headquarters. So Tishman Spire were employed to be the developer on their behalf. Very fee-based, not investment-based, fee-based. And so my job for 8 years of the time I was at Tishman Spire was to deliver 1.2 million square feet of Goldman Sachs' European headquarters. The second one at the same time as doing that was a project called Verde. Verde is in Victoria. That was between 2011 and 2016. An office refurbishment, cut and carve, about 400,000 square feet. Acquired it off the government who were in a lease there, and went through redevelopment, planning permission, all the way through the process to leasing, all the way to the end to selling it. So in that time, those are probably the two larger ones. I also worked on a couple of listed buildings. I got some planning permission for Grade 2 star listed buildings, redevelopment of Smithson Plaza, which is quite an interesting building. It's one of the tallest buildings in Westminster. 360-degree views of London, fantastic space, Grade 2 star listed. And we had an opportunity of leasing that at £200 plus at the time. Was a big mover in the dials, but again, a great project to work on.
Can we just touch on sustainability and ESG, because that has been a kind of a core value, I guess, of yourself personally, and something you've been doing for a very long time, pre it being popular, let alone essential right now. Where has that come from, and why have you been such an advocate when it comes to ESG?
I guess there's two or three reasons, but the first one, just to go back to Verde, that was 2011 when we acquired it. The first whole life cycle carbon analysis done by Tishman Spire was in 2012, and that was Verde. So we knew that we had to look at the project with that in its mindset, and no one was talking about it. And it was knowing that you had to do something, because there was a lot about climate crisis, a lot about the challenges. So when everyone talks about the problem with embodied carbon and operational carbon, it's all to do with real estate. So that's point one. So you knew you had to start doing something, and we work incredibly hard now. But even then, I was doing whole life cycle carbon analysis on how to get the best out of the project. I think the second thing is, it's exactly the same as the first. I've got two young children. They're 16 and 14. And for years, when they go to school, they are taught about the climate crisis. They talk about challenges. They talk about why there are floods. And they're given descriptions. And part of it's linked back to real estate. My daughters come home and talk to me about, why are you working in real estate that's damaging the climate crisis? So for me, that was the second driver. And the third driver is, I don't believe you can be sustainable unless you combine E and S. So we talk a little bit about E, but if you don't get S right, you cannot be sustainable. So those are the three subjects. And S, I've been looking at S, the social part, for many, many years. How do you help and support those that can't become sustainable? And what I mean by that is, I think the stat is 20% of buildings will be redeveloped at some point in the world. That leaves 80% of buildings that are not going to be energy efficient. So we need to work harder to help and support reducing that quantum as well. So I think S is, I say this many times, E is easy, S is sophisticated, G is given. If we get S right, we will be sophisticated in helping and supporting sustainability in the wider context, not just about energy, not just about carbon, but how do you create an equitable and supportive environment that's definitely going to be sustainable.
And going on that journey is obvious now, but back then, was that a challenge in terms of pitching it to investors or occupiers or other stakeholders, getting them involved in the journey and understanding that?
At the beginning, it wasn't selling to investors. It wasn't selling to occupiers. It was thinking about how we can create something better that also saved money. How do we think about it to get a betterment? And an example of that on a Verde project was outside space, terraces. So actually that's sustainable in its heart. And it also does create an opportunity in return, because in those days, terraces was the big mover of reducing void and increasing leasing. So actually it probably went back to investors. So whilst we spent a lot of time, we were looking at where and how we were spending money. So it didn't increase the capex, we kept the capex the same. But for example, we removed some glazing panels that we then sent away to be tested. These were old glazing panels that weren't fit for purpose in the new product, but we went away and tested them. And in those tests, we proved that you didn't need to replace the glazing, you didn't need to replace the gaskets, So actually, from a sustainability perspective, it allowed us to think of better ways of designing the new facade to last 50 years, 60 years, 70 years. So it was the start of that journey of spend embodied carbon well, try and increase the embodied carbon for its longevity. And then thirdly, talk about the social, the wellness, the outside air, and those sort of third parts. So that's how it all started, thinking about how to create a better building. And then about 10 years later, the returns were proven. And then the reason for being sustainable now is the right reason. The S is the bit that makes the difference.
You were UK Head of Design and Construction between 2011 and 2019 before leaving to join Grafton. Why and how did that come about?
It was a moment in time where I had worked with Tishman Spire and I was looking for that next opportunity. One thing I didn't say earlier, I did a project in Madrid. I took the principles of what I did in London and went to Madrid. And if you know Madrid, they like cars or use a lot of cars. They are not ahead in terms of whole life cycle carbon. And I went to Madrid to develop a building with the ethos of what we were doing in London to try and promote that. So that was my sort of opportunity. And it was hard work. It was a struggle. We created a great scheme, but it still had cars. So I knew that I needed to find that next opportunity to move it a step further. And at the same time, I was offered an opportunity to go to Grafton Advisors, which had a scheme, which is 105 Victoria Street, that's an island site. And this is what I said to the investors when I first met them. I cannot be given a more exciting opportunity that is a square building with no party walls. It's in the heart of Victoria, and I have an opportunity to make something really special here. And that was the driver, one of those drivers, as well as all the other portfolio. When you look at that scheme, this is the next step for my career, the next step for me with my opportunity of creating something brand new in the heart of Victoria.
And it was too good an opportunity to turn down. And so it was the opportunity to work on that landmark project was the real driver that got you really excited about going. Quick one from me. If you haven't already subscribed or followed this show on the podcast or app where you listen or watch, please do. It takes 10 seconds and helps tremendously. I've got really big plans for the People, Property, Place podcast, and that one small action really, really helps grow the show and the presence and enables us to keep doing what we're doing. So if you haven't already, please follow or like on the platform you watch or listen to. Thanks so much. So you joined the business. Can you just talk to me about the evolution of that project, but also the other projects that you inherited, and the portfolio that you're working on?
So if I talk about just 3 different projects, because they all have different meanings. I think the first one is one that we had, which was a building in St James's. It was a Grade 2 star listed building. A third of the building is Grade 2 star listed, and the 2/3 were refurbished. It needed its opportunity to be changed. It's quite hard to do whole life cycle carbon analysis when you've got a Grade 2 star listed building. So you've got to think about the way of making it more energy efficient in the 2/3 to offset the bit that you can't do in the first third. So It meant that there was an accelerated opportunity to think about wellness, think about opportunity, think about the market, think about trying to be energy efficient. It's 120,000 square feet in St James's, and about 10% of that was amenity. And we have outside space, opportunity for people to go out, fresh air. And it really was a baby version of what I'm about to talk about with 105. It was not the test case, because it was proving that the market needed amenity, needed outside space, needed greenery, needed wellness. All of those things are within 78 St James Street. And at the same time, we were delivering a scheme that was 450,000 square feet of net, 750,000 square feet of gross of this island site. How do we create the best move? So I talked about the things you couldn't do with a listed building. Well, now is the opportunity of natural ventilation, really pushing the boundaries on embodied carbon, how to reduce it, how to maximize the reduction in operational carbon. Greenery, how do you get greenery in? All of those great things. So you sort of take one project and expand on it. And actually this scheme allows us to prove and cement the requirement for E and S in the leasing velocity and in terms of the leasing return. So this project will underwrite why we've been doing this work for the last 15 or 20 years. So that's the second project. Another one is 101 New Cavendish Street, where actually the role there was to change the entrance, the experience of how you arrived. It was so sort of security centric, i.e. there was a big security guard that said hello, but in a way that was a bit aggressive. And we changed that to a much more concierge. I'd worked hard in a lot of my projects to bring hotel experience into receptions. And there happens to be actually on 78 St James Street, there's an individual called Henry who I employed on a project who came from the hotel world. And he was a security guard by job, but he invited and talked and gave you that opportunity. So we changed the ethos of 101 New Cavendish Street to be a much more gracious and opening and welcoming. And then we changed a few of the floors when they became vacant. And now it's a vibrant space. So you had the huge project, the sort of middle project, and then these little ones that we were working hard on how to change the product, how to change it into the ethos of what people want today, because we couldn't really do much with the outside. So those are just three. I mean, I can carry on talking about many others, but we've looked at everything from small, medium, and super large in the city, in Islington, in Westminster. Those are sort of the patches we've been working on.
Has COVID accelerated a lot of the trends that you'd already identified by 5 to 10 years or so? And was that an eye-opening or a mindset shifting moment?
Yeah, I mean, COVID, and I've learned how to say this, is that COVID was a dreadful thing, but there are many, many positives that you can take out of something that is negative. And some of the things that we had already made decisions on, like natural ventilation, every single scheme we develop has natural ventilation, fresh air, being able to open up and experience natural ventilation, which actually goes back to 30 Summary Acts, which I'll talk about in a second. But we'd already made those decisions. But also it was about people not wanting to get into lifts, changing the way they were using it. And now a lot of people will walk up a set of stairs, 2, 3, 4 stories as their health kick in terms of when they come to the office, they go up. So it sort of almost promoted us. We were trying to put staircases that were available for people to use instead of lifts. So it almost accelerated, it pumped it up to something that we've been trying to push, to actually use your own body to actually get a benefit in the project. And we sort of taken those as opportunities to move forward. But if I take Goldman Sachs as a great example, we talked about flu when we first designed the building. Flu is a natural product of absenteeism within that organisation. And we did a study that actually you don't want lots of handles on toilets, obviously when you get into the toilet, but like an airport, we thought about how do you create a chicane so that you don't touch any doors when you go in until you physically go to the toilet. Whether or not that saved flu, I don't know, but it definitely helped during COVID. It definitely helped to stop people touching things. So I think the pandemic has been a positive for learning and accelerating what we've been trying to achieve. And definitely, without a doubt, we were asked lots of questions from occupiers. What have you done with air? How have you stopped mixing? How do you stop people touching things? What's your automatics passing? So it changed the mentality of occupiers to ask more questions. I would say now you don't get asked those questions. They have now fallen away. And I think either that's because they expect it, or two, they've forgotten. One of the two.
Yeah, interesting. In terms of the design-led aspect of development, do you think that's shifted or that's changed because of COVID over and above what you've just touched on in terms of the way that it looks and feels? Or is that just as it was before COVID?
I think there are parts where you get nods. So if you're doing a presentation and you talk about natural ventilation, if you go to a presentation like 105 Victoria Street, where we've made all the air the control of the tenant, you get lots of, oh, that's great. That's really, really positive. But I think all the other things I was talking about, I'm not sure it has changed the design, because I think a lot of things have already gone into the cycle. They're already absolutely done. So I'm not sure we are looking back. I mean, an example of where we have a conversation is we've created an algorithm on 105 Victoria Street for you going into lifts. And the algorithm is not particularly clever, but working with Schindler, we've come up with a thing called a green button. If you press a green button on your phone as you go in, if you want to, you can press the green button for the lift and you can go slower in the lift so that they equalize the energy. The energy going up is using energy. The energy of a car coming down equalizes. It might take you 15 seconds longer to get to work, but you will not use any energy. So would we have done that without the pandemic? Probably, but we were trying to persuade people to use staircases that probably with that 15 seconds would have worked. Now we're bringing it into technology that talks about how do you save time. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. The one thing I would say is, this is a little analogy about natural ventilation. 30 Samariacs is developed by a Swiss organization. And I remember going to Switzerland in Zurich and meeting the person responsible for the project. And he took us into his office and said, I want to give this to my staff in London. And we didn't really understand what that meant. He opened a window and said, look, I want fresh air. I want to be able to look at mountains. The reality is in London, you won't look at mountains, but he wanted fresh air. And we just tried, but there was pollution, it's windy, it's rainy. I don't care. I would like to give exactly the same to my employees in London as I do in Switzerland. So 30 Samariacs became the first naturally ventilated building in the city. It's probably one of the only ones being built. But that ethos was about a person. How do you create the best for that person to work? So now my design ethos is about how is that individual going to be best at work? So whether or not it's the pandemic or not, how do you allow that person when they come to work to be the most productive, to be the safest, to be the wellness is, whatever that right word is, in that environment? And that, I think, is the shift for me. It's about people, not about the cloaking of a building.
Can you just talk to me a little bit about the fund, the size? I did a little bit of it in terms of the intro, and you touched on kind of three of the assets as well. Can you just talk about the different kind of return hurdles or profiles? And am I right to say it's an evergreen fund as well? Can you just expand on that further?
So Welput has been around, as you said, for over 20 years. It is a fund that now has been moved from an open-ended fund to a closed fund. Which means that we've got our existing assets, and there's 9 of them that are going through certain cycles, whether or not they are finished and they're a core asset, or whether or not they're going through redevelopment. So actually, as a product, it's moved from being just a core plus with a bit of value add to more of value add to maximise the return for the investors over the next 4 or 5 years. So that's the principles behind it. And it's fair to say with the market as we are, there's some challenges in values, but there's also some opportunities for us to take in the next 3 to 4 years. The good thing is in our fund, we've got the assets and the assets are available for redevelopment. So there's only a few that are in the core side, but we have opportunities for going forward.
What are the challenges when you look at those different buckets within the current context of the environment that we are in right now?
So one of the challenges is policy in terms of the policy that's coming in about retrofit, rebuild, not rebuild. That is a challenge. In Westminster, 75% are conservation area. It means that there's a small amount of buildings that are not in that conservation area that need to be worked hard to get return. I think the other thing that I would say is that when you're looking at projects in the city is about driving additional assets. They think they want 1.2 million square feet of new space in the city, and therefore that's a real opportunity for us to push hard and hopefully get some planning permissions to allow us to realise that. So it's sort of, those are two opposites. The second thing is debt. The second thing is equity. If you're in a place today, we are probably, if not at the bottom of the market. We are at a challenging time for debt, but I would say we're in a very positive time for equity raising, because everyone will start to see that the opportunity is coming back, certainly in central London. And I won't talk about the rest of Europe, but in central London, it's a real opportunity. And part of that, just to conclude the question, is that there is very few projects being delivered in 2026, and we happen to be a very large proportion of that. Hardly anything in 27, hardly anything in 28, and nothing in 29. So if there's one time to acquire, to redevelop, to move forward, it is now, because ultimately those 3 years are the open opportunity for projects that we have.
So if you can develop and deliver schemes into those markets, there's going to be a supply and demand imbalance. And so developers should do very well just in terms of the sheer quantum of people looking for best-in-class space in central London.
Yes, and I think you've touched on it there, which is important, is best-in-class. It's about delivering the most sustainable, the most socially aware, and also the best products. If you get those three together, you are delivering to the right answer for the right tenants. And there's a lot of people out there looking for opportunities. I think the stat is there's more 100,000 square foot floor plate requirements in London than there has been before. Bad first quarter, hopefully a good second quarter, third quarter and fourth quarter.
Can you just talk to me about 105? Because you do something quite interesting just in terms of everyone who works on 105 in terms of a project has to sign up to a charter. Can you just elaborate and tell me a little bit more about the rationale behind that and what that charter is, and the project too? Okay,
so I'll try and be succinct on this because I can talk for hours on this subject. But in essence, it is three things. The first thing is about teamwork. It is a model to create people to collaborate. Every single person on the project, whether it's contractor or consultant, has been interviewed as individuals first. It's about creating people. So this is a team building activity. The second thing is relating to supporting the local community. So we spend so much time talking about developing buildings. We do lots of research for planning. We all talk about what's right and what's wrong and how we can influence it. Well, why don't we take that a step further and actually carry that out beyond planning, during construction and beyond. So it means that we're supporting the local community, whether that's charities, whether that's schools. That's the key to it. So you're linking people with the place they're developing and the schools and the individuals that will benefit from. And the third one, which is probably the most important, is that we're creating a legacy for the building. The legacy is saying that we are doing all this work for the next, I've done it for 5 years, probably finishing in another 2.5 years. So 7 years work, finding the right partners, or charity partners, that then the one person that comes in is the occupier. The occupier steps into that role and in perpetuity is supporting the local community. So we're offering someone not only an energy efficient building, a fantastic product, but a set up social strategy that goes from team building with my people to the contracting organisation to the next round of people, which are the occupiers. And if the occupiers come in, they think about their people, they know that they're supporting the local school, they know they can go to the community centre to help with the tea party or go to the local green area. It sort of is almost wrapping it into this way, go back to what I was saying, E and S. If you get S right, E becomes easy and you become a group that create this product that is for the future and not just solely thinking about the next 10 years.
Can you talk to me about the G with ESG? Because you've spoken a lot about the E and the S. The G hasn't quite had as much airtime.
It doesn't, because it's given, right? It's governance. It's about creating that thing that you should be doing. We should be doing G. We shouldn't even have an acronym ESG, in my opinion. G is something that we have to follow. We have to be right. We have to correct everything in terms of governance. So I don't ever talk about G because I say it's given. It's something that we have to do.
As part of your role, and I touched on it earlier, your title is Development Director, but really your role is so much more than that. Can you just talk to me about the different facets and different parts of your role too?
Yeah, for the last 6 months, I've had an opportunity to be much more responsible with the overall fund. And it means that not only am I doing the development side, I'm also doing elements that relate to investor management, the asset management, the general running of the buildings, going to talk to investors, future investors, thinking about co-investing. So it's a bigger role, and it is an opportunity to do that next step. So we talked about steps, starting with the QSing and slowly being given opportunities. I was given this opportunity by BGO to step up into a bit more of a wider role because someone had left the firm. And I've taken it, grabbed it, relished it, and spent a lot of hours thinking about it, working on it. And that is the future for me, is the next phase of now creating a new fund, a new opportunity, raising some more equity to actually do all the things I've been doing for the last 30 years, but actually do it with those investors, with the new debt providers, as almost a club of people with my experience to work with them to deliver the right answer, to respond to E, to respond to S. That mission is set, and that mission is important.
So take all that experience, all those learnings, all the buildings that you've delivered, the team and the people that you've worked with, and then take advantage of the opportunity set that is in front of us. It seems like lots of people are raising capital to be central London office focused. Can you just talk to me about where you see the opportunities over and above maybe what we've spoken about, and what are the key things that you'll be looking for in terms of the assets that you'll be going after?
Well, I think the first thing is, in terms of raising capital, we are going to have some fantastic case studies of certainly the last 5 years, and I can report a lot longer about the case studies, but case studies about why we do E, why we do S, why we push hard on product, why we change and look for those new opportunities, why we're doing whole life cycle carbon. And I think that as a package is quite unique in the market, especially when I will be the person selling it, and it's incredibly important. And I have a team behind me that have also been part of that journey who would be front and center with me, delivering that message that we can achieve. I think the second part about what we're chasing those opportunities that means that we can create that change, that way of giving a strong, sustainable answer through the treacle-like versions of the policies on planning, which is incredibly difficult. Over the last 30 years, you can see the changes. But to think about that way we can take a product that is in grade B, grade C, and deliver it as A+, the super prime of offices. And I think that's probably where our niche is. And having done all those different types of projects I've talked about in 5 years, we've got every single thing from a tiny adjustment all the way up to the new build that will be out there selling, but with the team that have actually done all of those projects over the last 5 years. So I think that's where our benefit is, where our opportunity is. And then obviously we'll be persuading a number of our investors that have worked with me over the years to be a part of that journey next.
Someone listening to this who's early on in their journey, what advice from a career perspective would you give them, bearing in mind you've been able to reinvent, pivot, shift, set up your own business, work as a developer, work on in a private equity type environment? What advice would you give them if they can relate to being wildly ambitious and driven and want to have a little bit of the success that you've had? What advice would you give someone like that?
I think hard work is, without a shadow of a doubt, and drive are two really important words where you look at the opportunity. And if someone says that you need to do number one, you need to do number two, number three, number four, number five. You need to think about how can you do something more. Go off and do more, ask for people to support you. Still do one well, but the 2, 3, 4, and 5 is going to give you that opportunity to expand. And that's effectively what I've done. I will also go back to having someone that's a mentor. My job, my future role, and it has been for a few years, is to find opportunities to help and support people and listen and give advice, be the sounding block. So that's my job going forward, but it is definitely about grab, move forward, think, try and look at the better place and see those avenues, talk to people, be confident. All those types of things is how I see it.
Can you just talk about flipping the script when it comes to designing these buildings?
Yeah, I mean, if I use 105 Victoria Street as the example, we have a strapline called Find Alternative. And the principle behind that is delivering the best product in different ways, looking at different opportunities. And the design one was normally the architect is lead, is king, and the sustainability consultant, I've been talking to a lot about E, is in the side, never really heard, pushed away. What we did is we changed that. We actually made the sustainability consultant the lead consultant, and each of the architects, the engineers, all had a person on the sustainability group. And I wouldn't review a piece of design unless it had been through that group. So I knew what the embodied carbon was, what the opportunity for operational. So it meant that we actually created the ethos and the principles around truly whole life cycle carbon, rather than it being just a purpose to get planning permission. And actually, the one point I would say is that we have just completed stage 4 and we've done a whole life cycle carbon analysis. We plan on doing it at the end. And we're also sharing all this information with the public. So it's incredibly important. So that's the Find Alternative bit.
Can you talk about the social strategy as well, and where that kind of interlinks with commuting and accessing the buildings too?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Verdi earlier, which was, I think, the first bike ramp that went through a reception. So that was sort of sets the scene of what I'm trying to do. And that removes car parking. So remove car parking, cycling as an important part. Most times, cyclists go in the loading bay, the back door. And I cycle 5 days a week to work. It's my commute. It's nothing special, but that's what I do. So therefore, why shouldn't I have the same experience as an individual walking in a suit or a pair of trainers into work? So therefore, 105 Victoria Street not only is creating this experience that is second to none, and when the images come out, and you'll see these, is a triple height space with a circular ramp that really celebrates about sustainable travel. It means that when you cycle in, you have a very, very important path into the building. And secondly, you go past the activity zone, which has a gym and it has the area for bikes, but it also says it's got extra lockers for people that walk to work, that want to change their trainers into their shoes, for people that run. So it's really, really, really important that there is not a front and a back entrance in 105. It's all about the single entrance for anyone who's doing anything. And the link to the social strategy is we did a cycle ride down to Brighton. It's 105 kilometres for 105 Victoria Street. It has about 105 people doing it. And it's about raising money for local community. And we did a ride that was last Friday, which was the second one. The first one went to Windsor. So we've gone south to Brighton, we've gone west to Windsor, and we've got north and east to go. So we've got 2 years before we complete the building. And this is the link back to the design. We'll probably go, let's say, east next time. And that will be going out from 105 out to east. We'll have another event. We'll raise money. It'll be great. The social partners join us. And then the fourth one, which is in 2026, is going to go, let's say, from the north down to 105. We're going to end in 105. All the cyclists are going to go down the ramp. They're all going to park their bikes up, and we're going to have a little party in the village square. So it goes back to team building. It's raising money. It's something that I love. And surprisingly, there's another 100 people that like cycling. So it's a great opportunity of doing all of those things. The last thing I would say about that, we had the the head of social strategy of Westminster there. We had charity partners from the Abbey Centre, Wandering Minds, Westminster Wills. We had schools, we had a headmaster of a school turning up. So we've actually got connection with not only the people that do work, but that embodied part where the social strategy is working, because we're having us charity partners working with us. So it's super exciting to have this. And I look forward to the next one, 105K in May, east or north. That's a debate.
I think you'd probably get much more uptake the fact it's a cycle, because I know you're into cold water swimming. If you ask people to do a 105-kilometre cold water swim, I don't think that would you get quite as much interest. But it sounds absolutely phenomenal. Well, look, a question that I ask everyone who comes on the podcast as we look to draw this to a close is: if I gave you £500 million worth of capital, who are the people, what property, and which place would you look to deploy that capital?
So let's talk about 400 million of that. I would look at opportunities to make carbon reductions as part of a process to sell to others to help them deliver on low embodied carbon. But you mentioned about open water swimming. It's incredibly important for me to think about buying some lakes. Maybe it's an algae farm. But also, I've had a number of races cancelled because of the river, and a lot of people are hearing about the rivers. I would like to come up with some plan that allows me to create a beautiful river, 5K, not 105K, 5K of swimming for everyone to use, that is absolutely crystal clean, that also has some way of connecting to saving energy. Don't know what the answer is, but that's where my 400 million will go. And the last 100 million would invest in central London offices, where I know how to make a good return and continue rolling that up to spend more money to offset the hassles that we have in our rivers and our lakes and everything else.
We have a little pump that goes through one of your buildings. Who knows?
Potentially.
And in terms of people, we've touched on property in place. Is there anyone that you've worked with during your career that you would grab and bring them along as part of the journey? Any mentors or?
So I've mentioned the individual on numerous occasions. This guy was One Canada Surveyors construction director. So he was responsible for the original Canary Wharf from a delivery perspective. He is without a doubt an absolute influence on my career, an absolute support. And as I say, he's still someone that I ask questions to. I still talk to him. We are still friends. And I started in 1997 when I met him. So it's quite a long period. His name is Richard, and he's a mate, and he's a good friend, and he's a good friend to my family and my children. So I'm not going to say any more than that, but he is, no question, the influence and support, other than my family, but as an individual that's not family related, that has made a huge difference to my life.
How, if someone listening to this who's earlier on in the journey, how do you think they should go about looking at getting a mentor, and what are the kind of things that they should look for, and how should they approach it?
Well, I mean, I think I already said in the interview here that, you know, part of my role is to do exactly that. There are lots of people at my age that are willing and want to support young. In fact, I have a call after this where someone has reached out from Canada that's reached out and asked me a question about coming to London. I said, of course, I'll speak to them. I've got a half an hour call. I'm not saying I will be able to do that with everybody, but if someone gets the energy to go and find, looks in the market, you will find individuals that will want to help you. There's no question that there are a lot of people that want to see the market growing, new opportunity, new people. So
sage advice, and you're absolutely right. There's a lot of people who've come on this podcast as well whose inboxes get flooded post-podcast with people looking to grab a couple of minutes of their time just to ask a couple of questions, and it's great that you're open to doing so as well. Well, look, you and the team are doing some phenomenal work, and it's really exciting to see what you're going to be doing over the next 5-10 years, taking advantage of the opportunity set in front of us. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time and some of the learnings. And like I said, excited to see what you go on to do.
Thank you very much. I'm good.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the People, Property, Place podcast. If you found it insightful, feel free to share it with a friend or colleague. Give us a rating, like, or comment. It helps tremendously. It'd be great to hear from you on LinkedIn. I'm super open-minded to recommendations of guests that we should have on the show or areas of the market we should explore further. So do drop me a message. The People, Property, Place podcast is powered by Rockborn. The team recruit leadership and future leadership hires for real estate owners, funds, investors, and developers. So if you're looking to hire top talent for your business, head over to the website www.rockborn.com, where you'll be able to find a wealth of information, or feel free to drop me a message on LinkedIn. Have a great day wherever you are, and I look forward to catching you next time.